Well, it's a very warm welcome to Adrienne Cahalan, winner of the last Hobart race as the navigator. But a great story in sailing for you, Adrienne. Where did and how did it all begin?
Well, it was, I wasn't the traditional parents take me down to the sailing club, although I did grow up in Lane Cove near the Lane Cove River. So I used to listen to some kids on the bus home from school from the sailing club and think, oh wow, this sounds like fun. And when we went on holidays, which was up at Smiths Lakes, there was a couple of families that had a laser, so I used to just muck around on that. But I think the first time I went sailing was when I visited my cousins in Papua New Guinea, and they took me on a catamaran out in the harbour. And that, you know, catamaran for a first sail in beautiful sun and warm water. I mean, I just fell in love with it straight away.
And what age would you have been then?
I was 14 then.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Right.
but I enjoyed competitive sports. I loved sport at school, and you know, played netball and tennis and things like that.
And so, okay, we had a catamaran in Papua New Guinea. From there, where did you go?
Well, then we were on the family holidays at Smiths Lake, and so I nagged this family. I used their laser all the time, and that's when I saved up. You know, I used to waitress part-time and everything, and I saved up and bought a laser, and so that was in like year 11, and then went down to put it down at the club.
At Lane Cove?
At Lane Cove 12-foot skiff club.
So you were basically self-taught till then, were you? Really?
Yeah, pretty much. Like I've never really had coaching, unlike some of the the kids now. There's a lot, which is great, a lot of programs and things. But having said that, I mean, Lane Cove is a wonderful club, and so people just helped you anyway, and helped you. Someone, a good friend, Mark Walsh, actually, a great 12-foot skiff sailor, took me on the Lane Cove River and taught me what a lift and a knock was.
Right. Well, you've learnt well, that's for sure. So from the laser, where did you go?
So I after that, so I bought a windsurfer at the same time as well as in my first year after school. So I then really immersed myself because it was so much fun and entered every regatta I could. So
in windsurfing?
In windsurfing and in lasers. And I was only 50 kilos at the time, so I learnt very quickly that lasers probably weren't the right one. But there's such great boats to start to learn to sail in, because you can capsize, they're easy to right, and you can take another person with you as well. So I really enjoyed that part of it and enjoyed all the social side of the club, and would enter the New South Wales. I drove across to Perth and did the nationals in the laser, and then I was down in the club one evening just polishing the bottom, because that was a very social thing too. Everyone would go down and work on their boats. And one of the club members, Jack Winning, said, a 12-foot skiff would suit you. You're light and he said, mine's for sale. And so I bought. I made the change, and that was in 1986. So I was about 21 or so, 22, and I never looked back after that, because I realised that skiff sailing was really the thing for me.
And it's a tricky place to sail, that Lane Cove River. You certainly get your lifts and knocks from all different directions, don't you?
Well, you do. You see, there's a great, being a river rat. It teaches you boat handling, and in the skiffs, that's everything. So it's a great place, and then you've got humbug as well.
Yeah, humbug. We won't go there. But who sailed with you then in the 12-foot skiff?
Well, it just so happened that at that time there was a group of people that all sort of bought 12-foot skiffs at the same time, my age. So my first crew was Jim Walsh, and we had I think one of the really fun days is when you're down the back of the fleet and you've got nothing to lose and you're just kicking around. And so there was quite a group of us that, maybe 6 or 7 of us, that started to climb up the ranks at the same time. So, and we'd swap crews. So I did 3 seasons in 12-foot skiff, and the third season 3 or 4 seasons I did, and then the third season I built my own boat.
Oh, really?
So, yeah, and so I got someone to build the hull, and I sort of project managed it, if you know what I mean, and that was with Michael Carter. Mm-hmm. He did all the sail program and everything, and our goal was the Inter-Dominions in 1988, and I was sponsored by Law Book Company then. So, and I think one of the highlights for me was I was down, in those days a lot of things were done in Manly Vale, in the different sheds down there, and one day I had my boat down there, and Ben Lexing came in and said, oh, that's a nice looking 12. And so, I sort of felt like, oh, this is a very exciting moment.
Yeah. And who designed the boat? Did you design?
No. I don't have expertise in yacht design. it was just, it would have been one of the moulds. They had moulds in those days, and I actually can't recall. But
did you contest the Inter-Dominion?
Yeah, we did.
Was that in Sydney or in Auckland?
It was in Auckland, actually. And for those that have ever sailed a 12-foot skiff in Auckland and it's windy, I mean, the 12-foot skiff really, sometimes it feels like you have to let the spinnaker go just to slow the thing down. And I remember going from the top of the harbour down to the bottom harbour in Auckland thinking, wow, I think we're going too fast.
Hey, we could stop.
Yeah, we could stop at the bottom. But we came sixth. I mean, we were close. We were third for a long time, and then we ended up sixth. But the next year, I'd been asked. One of the sponsors with Julian Bethwaite, who was putting all the B18s together, rang me up and said, "Were you interested to sail an 18?" And so I said yes straight away. And Andrew Cuddy and Michael Carter sailed my boat the next year, and they won the Inter-Dominion. Right. So I was really happy about that because it meant that it was a great boat. Yeah.
And so you stepped up into the 18s. And who sailed with you there?
Well, that was an interesting. So they were a new type of 18s. You know, they'd had all the two-handed. There was no rules. There was 30-foot wings, and this was part of the program to bring them back to a more affordable level. And the start of the Grand Prix circuit, which was a really fabulous time to be a part of. I mean, it was so exciting. You sailed, over 100 races in a short period of time. You were the fittest you ever were, and the racing was so intense. You know, you'd come into the bottom mark with lots of boats. Anyway, it's just hard to describe the excitement of it. But so my first crew was the Sheldrick brothers out of the 12s, and then mid-season we changed a little bit, and Julian Bethwaite and Mick O'Brien sailed with me at the second half of the season. So again, having the privilege to sail with those two experienced sailors, we got fourth in the nationals that year, and to me, again, this exciting sailing Moreton Bay, 25 knots and an 18-footer with Julian. I mean, it was a really bit of a baptism of fire, actually.
But just getting off the water onto shore, you were studying at this time for law? You studied law?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I did my first year at uni in 1982, and I did arts law. So, I certainly didn't get the medal, that's for sure. But university is a great time for sport because, you can sort of, particularly doing law and everything, it wasn't like I had to be in a lab every day like you do in the sciences. You could adjust your study accordingly, and so I was able to fit that in with the law and did lots of universities. It's a great place, university.
Yeah. Well, within the skiffs, when and how did yachts come into your life?
Well, it all sort of happened at once because actually I was thinking about that because my oldest brother was doing a bit of sailing, and there was a man who lived down the road, John Shields, who had a small sort of like 30-footer down at Royal Prince Alfred. My brother used to go with him, and he took me one day and we did the offshore races off Pittwater. And then I just kept sailing with him on a Saturday. He'd pick me up out the front and we'd go down. And again, he was very detailed and meticulous. And so teaching you good habits early is really important because there are just certain things you don't do and you didn't ever do them in the rest of your life. But at the same time, I made friends with particularly the Parker family, who owned another concubine. And we used to do the overnight races in the Blue Water series. And they used to say to me, "Oh, well, you're good at reading, you can do the navigation." But I did really enjoy that side of it. And at TAFE, at uni, in the second year uni, I went and did small craft seamanship and meteorology and coastal navigation and ocean navigation at night time.
And that was a tech course?
Yeah, at UTS,
right.
Yeah. And so I sort of immersed myself in it, and I love the navigation side of it.
Was that Celestial? Or?
Yeah, and Celestial.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
Yeah. Celestial is very hard. The people who do that well are really clever, and mathematical. That wasn't my strong point, math.
But did you see that as a way into?
No, not at all.
Yachting by becoming a navigator as such at that time?
No, because I just liked it. I've always loved Captain Cook. I remember the bicentennial. I remember 1970 very well when I was a child. You know, I just used to love all the marine books and things. And navigation, I mean, I was a helmsman then more really in the skiffs, so actually that's more what I was doing. It was just that they just said to me, the crew, can you look after this? And I said, yeah, of course, I'd love to. And my teacher, navigation teacher, Norman Wood, I kept in touch with him right up until he died, you know, maybe 10, 15 years ago. And he actually left me all these sextants and things.
Wow.
So I've got some incredible equipment, radio direction finders. He left me this big box and I went and picked it up and there was all this incredible equipment.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so did you, when did you do your first Hobart?
So I did my first Hobart in 1984.
On what boat?
On Mystic 7.
Oh, the Swanson 36.
Swanson 36.
Gigi.
Yeah.
Neville Gigi.
Neville Gigi, yes.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, gosh,
okay.
you've got a good memory.
Yeah.
And so what happened was I started, because of with the friends from uni, and I, you know, as you do, you come down to this club and just, you know, the world's just wide-eyed and all these people and, you know, looking at all these people walking the docks who you've only ever heard about, you know. And so I was sailing on a Sunday and I started to sail, I was, believe it or not, I was working at the Middle Harbour 18-foot skiff club behind the bar, and the doorman there, Bruce Perry, said, oh, you know, why don't you come with us on a Sunday? And that was with Norman Ridge. Yeah, so on Magazine. And so then we did, my first offshore race was the Sydney Lord Howe Island.
Right, on Magazine?
On Magazine, yeah, so Norman Ridge who took me, and obviously wonderful person to sail with and in very safe hands there. So, and then, you know, after I've got the taste after Lord Howe.
You weren't navigator?
No, I was just a general crew. And then I went, oh, well, next step, Hobart. And I didn't have a ride, but I'd met Neville Gigi and his crew over there in Lord Howe. Right. And I thought, oh, well, you know, there's no reason I can't look for a ride for the Hobart. And I remember one particular person at the bar I had mentioned, and they said, oh, you'll never get a ride. You'll never get a ride. You haven't, you know, done. And I went, oh, well, you know, you don't worry about that. And then a week before, Neville Gigi, one of the crew for Neville Gigi rang me and said, you know, one person's pulled out. So a week before the Hobart, there I was, ready to go in my Line 7 wet weather gear.
Exactly, as we all did. And what was the race like? What did you?
Well, that was one of the roughest on record.
Which year was it?
1984.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
wow.
that was rough. So it took us
then.
about 4 days to get to Eden. And then we finished on New Year's Day. So, but, you know, like the boat down below was warm. It was Neville Gigi and his wife Val, and Val navigated, and they'd done 8 or 10 Hobarts already. There was only 6 of us. It was a small boat, and yeah,
they're good boats, those Swanson 36s.
Yeah, absolutely.
Seaworthy boats.
Yeah, so that was, you know, and obviously being with Neville and Val, you know, they were, everything was dry below, very strict rules, got to take all your gear off, and so it was a very good environment, you know.
And a good learning curve.
Very good,
sure.
Yeah. So I remember we pulled into Eden and fixed the main, so yeah.
Well then, where do we go from there?
Well, after that, so 1984, that was sort of the 12-footers, and then I went into the 18. So I really was focusing on dinghy sailing. So I actually didn't do another Hobart race till 1990. Wow. And I didn't navigate. That was on group therapy. I did that on 1990 and 1991. Right. Because in those days, a lot of the 12 nationals, well, the Interdominions and also the 18s were in those weeks just after Christmas. So I wasn't able to do both. And also it coincided a little bit with the sailing, the law studies and things. Right. So, but I did continue to do all those races like the Malula Bar and those fabulous races, you know, to Bird Island and Flinders. And so 1991, and then 92, I skippered my own boat to Hobart. That was the Ella Bache Beyond Thunderdome. Yes. But then we had a group of about... actually, one of the really fun things that happened, you know, when you're young, was on Windward Passage, they got a group of girls together to do the race to Newcastle, and they had the men's boat and then they had the women's boat. And so, you know, I was on board with people like Alex Murray, Nicola Beckwith, you know, all these people who you really looked up to, Vanessa, and that was an incredible opportunity. So by now you had quite a big group of girls that were all sailing in different respects, and we sort of said, well, why not put a crew together? And I had the backing of my sponsor, John Hallis in Ella Bache, and we put that together. And when
he sponsored the 18 as well for you,
did.
didn't he? That's
Yeah,
right,
yeah. So that was good. So we did that in '92. So I skippered, and you know,
so that was the one tonner, was it? That
Yeah,
belonged to Warren Johns. Is that?
That's right.
Yeah,
yeah.
And was that an all-girl crew?
That was an all-girl crew. Right. Yeah, and we still all keep in touch. And we, as a skipper, I mean, you know, I didn't have any idea of what is required. I mean, I did, but you know, it's a tough job being a skipper, and it's actually not a job I really enjoy very much. You know, I do prefer being the navigator.
And who navigated that year for you?
I did.
Oh, you did?
Yeah,
You
I did both jobs.
Okay.
Yeah,
Right.
and it was pretty rough. I remember sort of being down below, and but we had a lot of experience. We had Kathy Johnson from Bullfrog, Vanessa Dudley, Amanda Wilmot. We had a lot of good people. Right. So we got the boat there, but we ripped our main, so we weren't in as good.
Were you
place.
practicing celestial then, navigation on the boat, or were we pushing buttons?
No, we weren't pushing buttons then. GPS had sort of only just come in really in the early 90s, so I don't recall pulling out a sextant, but you know, I think it was a bit more straightforward. We could do it on DR, but certainly in 1984, Neville had the sextant out. I remember, and then the GPS came in. Because in those early days of doing all those races, Flinders Bird and everything, you were doing the lighthouse.
Yes.
You know, looking with the flashes and the you know, running fixes. I don't really miss that.
No, exactly.
Certainly the stress, because I do recall before that '92 race, I'm thinking, wow, okay, I've got to do this now. I've got to navigate, because that was my first race navigating.
Right, and then. After that, you said...
So 92, then after that, I started to look further afield, and I saw they were putting together a team for the Whitbread.
Yes.
And I applied to that, which was US Women's Challenge. So that was in 92, 93. Yes. So I was sailing the 18s, and then I said to John, you know, I really want to go and try out for this team. And he gave me the blessing, you know, with the 18-footer. And I went and tried out in Annapolis, not going as a navigator, going as a helmsman, and then they ended up knowing that I had some experience in navigating, so they put me into that role. But it was interesting because I stayed then for the transatlantic, which was one of the lead-up races to the Whitbread, and I'd never navigated Great Circle before. Right. So I actually rang my navigation teacher, Norman Wood, and I said, okay,
what do I do?
Yeah. But by then we had GPS and everything. So
it was a steep learning curve, really, when you're jumping on a boat to do transatlantic and Whitbread.
But that's just what you did.
Yeah.
You know, you just sort of put your hand up and said, I can do this.
But did you go all the way on that women's challenge?
Yeah. Yes, I did. So that was in the winter of 93. And then I stayed with them and did the whole round the world race. It changed to Heineken after the first leg because there were some issues with ownership and also with money. They really didn't have enough money to finish the race.
Where did that race start? Did that start in England?
That started in England. And then it went to Punta del Este.
Oh, first.
Yes. And so that was about, in those days, that was 25 to 30 days at sea.
Yeah.
And then we went then from Punta del Este right through to Fremantle. That was quite a long leg. Yeah. And then we'd switched over skippers then. Heineken had come in and Dawn Riley had come in as skipper, and there was a small change of crew in addition to sort of the key players that were already there. And then we did, and that was then from Fremantle to Auckland to Punta del Este, Miami, home, yeah.
And how did you find that navigation? Was it
the navigation was fantastic. Was it? Yeah, I mean, on the other boats, there was, for example, Mike Quilter, Andrew Cape, you know, and again, helpful. You could ask them questions. It was really good. When you do those long races and you're part of that team for a long time, you learn a lot of skills on the electronic front, all the B&G, you know, how to replace things at sea, fix things at sea, you know, you start reading the manuals. And so that was the base of very important skill set for me. And also, you know, you had weather faxes then, so you'd wait for the paper to come out of the machine. And we did all our skeds by HF radio. So that was a really important time to develop those key offshore skills of being self-sufficient. Because, I mean, when you are out there in these ocean racing yachts, as you know, I mean, you're your own little world. You know, you're making your own water. You've only got what you've got. You're not fishing or anything like that, you know. And so you do have to be incredibly self-sufficient, particularly because in those days, no internet or, you know, no satellite communication. You really were on your own out there. So
in that race, correct me if I'm wrong, there was no ice limits then. You could go as far south as you wanted.
That's right. You could, and we saw a lot of ice. You see a lot of ice quite high in the Indian Ocean. You normally see that about 49, 50, although I haven't updated that for climate change because it might be a little less. But we did have to go up around Prince Edward Island, and that kept us a little bit higher. Right. But as it happens, you don't want to go too far south anyway, because you will get to the ice pack, and you don't want to go on the wrong side of the low pressure systems, and they
need some leverage.
So they generally sit, let's say, in the Indian about the centre about 50 south. So you don't want to be that low, but when you get the Pacific, the ice pack's lower, and the lows track lower because they track lower to get around Cape Horn, which is a different latitude to Cape of Good Hope. So again, there's a real skill navigating into the Horn because of where the orientation of the low pressures are.
And what was that race like? Cold and miserable, or enjoyable, or a bit of everything, I guess, was it?
Because it was a huge adventure, you know. So it was hard though, like dealing with personalities on board. You know, I was Australian. I learned a lot about because I was 29 and I'd done a lot of sailing here, and I learned a lot about having a bit more understanding of other cultures. That people do think differently, you know, not just my way or our way, you know. I mean, as Australians, we're quite, you know, we do like to just say it how it is. We're quite candid, and when you've got other nationalities, like you're dealing with British, American, so I did find it quite hard. And in fact, I remember in Auckland, I thought, you know, I'm not sure whether I can keep going just because of, you know, different things that were going on board. And but someone said to me, you know, no one will remember if you didn't finish it, and and that was really good advice actually, and we kept going. Yeah.
Did you see Cape Horn, or was it?
Yes, we did.
Did you?
Yes, I've been around a couple of times, and it looks a lot like the bottom of Tasmania.
Yeah.
It does feel like it, and in fact, when I did the Bruny Island race a couple of years ago, I thought, wow, it's incredible, just this windswept landscape. You know,
so people could go down there and take a photo of Bruny Island. So I've been around Cape Horn.
Well, they kind of have almost, you know, as well in the bottom four capes. You know, the traditional round the world bottom four capes: Cape Horn, then Southeast Cape, Tassie, New Zealand, and then Cape Horn. Yeah.
Well, Adrienne, we're back from our first Whitbread. Where do we go from there?
Well, it was the thing about doing a Whitbread is you meet people from all over the world and make a huge amount of sailing contacts. So one of the things about doing those round the world races is that it's very hard on your body because you're using freeze-dried food and eating freeze-dried food, and that's quite hard on your body, and you're just completely tired, exhausted. You've been at sea for a lot of days, and mostly about 30 days at a time. So I was pretty tired. I came back. I'd started working at a law firm in '92, and they Norton Smith, which was actually the oldest law firm in Australia, in their shipping department, and so, but they were very great with my sailing. They really supported it, and when I went to do the Whitbread, they said, you know, we'll give you leave to go. And so I went back and worked in the law firm for a year just to, which was good. And at the same time just did the local sailing here.
Well, you'd obviously got a name as a navigator by that time.
That's right. And there were various things we were looking to put together a team for the next race, which was the 97-98 race. and with various people around here who thought, it would be a good idea for another all-girls crew. So I then worked with them, but did regattas overseas. I did my first Admiral's Cup in '95, not as a navigator. Actually, I was up past the pit, so that was interesting. Yep. And but I also, during this time, I'd also done some Olympic campaigns. So in 1990, 91, I'd gone and done a Europe dinghy campaign.
In what class?
In the Europe.
Oh, the Europe dinghies, yeah, okay.
Yeah, so I went and spent a season over there, which was really great for your sailing, because being a skiff sailor, you don't, and plus not having come through that kind of pathways when you're a child, where you learn the real basics of tactics and things like that. That was really good to do that, and here did all those Kiel women's worlds in Amsterdam. And then the next year, I think I did the pre-Olympics in Barcelona. But, you were living off the smell of an oily rag, sleeping in cars.
Were you close to selection at all?
Not really, not in the Europe, I don't think. They weren't going to send anybody, I don't think. Right. I can't remember, to be honest. Yeah. And then in 95, with Jenny Danks, we did a 470 campaign. So a lot of 95 was spent, again, doing Spa, the 470 Worlds in Toronto. Oh. And then after that, I just went and lived in Fort Lauderdale for a while, in Newport, Rhode Island, Fort Lauderdale, because I'd completely run out of money. Right. And so I turned up in Newport and stayed with some friends and just cleaned boats at boat shows and things like that, did deliveries.
With a law degree behind you.
Yes, I know, but
that was the life.
That was the life. And so I did deliveries up and down the coast, Newport, Bermuda, the Caribbean. And that was when someone approached me to do Elle Macpherson was interested to do a Whitbread campaign. Yeah. So I was working over there. So I came back. I came back for the Hobart, which I did on Assassin with Robin Crawford. Because one thing was I always came home at Christmas. I've only missed 2 Christmases because I do get quite homesick, and so that was one thing I always did come home. And so I came back, and that was the start of that 96.
That all fell over, didn't it?
It did, yeah. We just didn't get the money in the end. And but we did. I assembled a team of a lot of the people that I'd met already from the women from the America's Cup and generally. And we actually sailed from, we bought chartered the old Heineken, which we'd gone around the world in, and we sailed from England all the way to Fremantle, which was a big undertaking. And we left and stopped in Cape Town, and then Rossfield came on, and we sailed then to Australia. And we actually sailed in the Southern Ocean in winter, in August. Yeah, so, by the time we got to Fremantle, we had a good crew together, and then we sailed it from Fremantle around to and that was when in 96 we did the Sydney Hobart as Elle Racing.
That's right.
So that was the second time I'd skip at a boat, And
was that all girl again?
That was all girls again, and the thing was, though, we had to start 5 minutes before the fleet because we had water ballast.
That's right.
And in those days, water ballast wasn't allowed. Yeah. But
times have changed.
Yeah. So we had a good race, and that's.
But wasn't there the next Whitbread, or was it Whitbread or Volvo? Whitbread then. Didn't you do just a leg?
Yeah, that was in 2005.
Oh, as far 2005. Was there any race in between that you did another Whitbread?
Well, I didn't. What I did then, instead of doing the Volvo, the Whitbread then, I was then asked to join Tracy Edwards' team for the Jules Verne.
That's right, Jules Verne,
Yeah, so
and how did that go?
That was fabulous. That was fabulous. I mean, I joined that in 97, and we went out and did the cross-channel record. I mean, Tracy Edwards is an amazing...
So this was a big catamaran, wasn't it?
Yes, so this was the old Enza.
Yeah.
And 100 foot, it's like the size of a tennis court. And that was my first time on multi-hulls. And it was quite another baptism of fire.
Was that where did that start from? that
The
race?
Jules Verne?
Yes.
So the Jules Verne is the
Lorry?
round the world record, and it starts at the corner of Land's End and the corner of France.
So it ushered...
The lighthouse.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
So you've got to cross the line.
and it's non-stop.
It's non-stop around the world. Yeah. So
Were you a navigator?
I was a navigator. Yeah. So we did a bit of lead up.
Yeah.
We did a bit of lead up, which we broke the cross-channel record. And then we tried round Britain and Ireland and didn't quite make that. But, you know, it was getting cold then. We're in October, November going up around the Orkneys and things like that. And but the multi-hull was great for me because being from skiffs, it was everything I knew about how to sail. You know, it was making decisions at high speed, thinking ahead. You know, the whole style of sailing was fabulous in the multi-hulls. And
Was that a mixed crew?
that was all girls.
All girl again.
And we all still talk on WhatsApp now. We've got, and it was a really great, the way it was set up in terms of the if I might say, generation experience, because you'll know the names I talk about now. You know, we had Tracy Edwards, who was the skipper, who's very good at organising these projects. And Royal and Sun Alliance were a really good sponsor too. And then there was myself, Michaela, who I'd done the Whitbread with. She was a watch captain, another girl, Helene, and another girl, Emma Westmacott, who'd been part of our London to Australia team. And then we had some names like records, Samantha Davies, who's a very famous single-handed sailor. So there was the three of them, and they were the little ones. They were only 22 when we did this. Emma Sanderson and also Sharon Ferris, who does a lot of sailing now, and Samantha Davies, and of course Miranda Merrin, who's done. So out of that, we sort of wonder how about 4 or 5 out of that program went off and sailed on their own.
Yes, but it was a race against the clock, wasn't it?
It was a race against the clock.
Wasn't any other boats?
No, and that's what makes it really interesting, because you don't have the fleet dynamics, and you actually go wherever you want to go. Nothing else influences you. It's kind of pure sailing, and you always say to yourself, if you lose this record by a second, you know.
Yes.
So racing against the clock makes the clock go really quickly. But we lost our rig actually down, as I talked to you about those low pressures earlier. A low pressure came up quite high, and we weren't able to go north fast enough. We were hightailing it north to get out of it, but we didn't make it, and we had a bad nosedive. And the rigs are all deck stepped.
Yes.
Yeah. So the rig came down. It took us. They were very nervous moments, because we had to first check everybody was okay. There was no, the hull wasn't damaged at all. There was no water coming in. And also you've got this massive main that's across the whole of the boat. But we got it all together. So that was on day 43. And then, you know, we were sitting out there. It's amazing how the noise on these catamarans is incredible. You can't probably imagine. It's just high pitched. And the interesting thing is, when you sail them, you actually live by the noise. You know, so when it goes quiet, you know, it's sort of. And so after all this noise, the rig came down. All of a sudden, it was dead quiet. We're sitting in 50 knots, and it's dead quiet. So anyway, but we sat down, we worked it all out, and we re-stepped what was left. We cut away the rig, re-stepped what was bottom of the mast, and re-sewed some sails, and then we sailed into Chile. So that was day 60, and got towed the last little bit up the channel.
And how were you on record pace when you?
Yeah, yes, we were, because we had to beat, I think it was Olivia de Kersason.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we had like 4 days to the Horn, 3 or 4 days to the Horn. We were about 2,000 miles. We were right in the middle. And in fact, when I did my thesis, when I went back to uni and did my degree, Bureau of Meteorology, not the Bureau, at the University of Reading, I did applied meteorology. And one of the things I talked in my thesis was exactly about this zone of where some people get lost. And it's about, I can't remember the latitude and longitude, but it's just 2,000 miles from Australia, from Cape Horn, from the Antarctic. It's a really place where...
Is that Point Nemo? Is that where they...
I don't know.
Is that the point furtest away from land anywhere?
Yeah, possibly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Point Nemo, I think they refer it to.
Yeah.
Is that about where you drop the rig?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and there was a couple of, open 60 sailors who'd gone missing around that area.
Right,
so, yeah.
Well, then, obviously you're in high demand worldwide. the Hobart races, you started to join yachts on high-profile yachts then as navigator?
Yes. So that was the time then we come to the 98 Hobart. And I was asked to sail with on Ray Roberts' team for the 98 Hobart. We had incredible crew of people: Ian Murray, Rich Jansen, Gordon Maguire, really, really incredible crew, Michael Spees. And we talked about it that morning about, this low pressure system. And this was a fairly light boat. It was one of those One Design 48. And as we got out there the first night, it was 30 knots downwind and Gordon was steering and, it was incredible sailing. And I remember at about 8 o'clock, because it was the weather facts then, I said to Ian down below, I said, the analysis has just come out and the 24-hour, and I said, there's no space in between these ISO bars, it's on. And so we were talking about it, what we were going to do, and then the rudder let go. So the decision was made for us. So we were already in Ulladulla when it all unfolded very badly. And, we all know what the consequences of that race were. But, it's at various times, even this year, this last year in 2023, when they looked about the low, there was a lot of discussion about those low pressures and the effect they can have, but we haven't seen another one since that time, thank goodness. Yeah. But it did shake up the industry, shake up a lot, because there were not many professional sailors as such then, and but it had the effect of the sport looking inwardly, and the safety stepped up to another level, which was good. So.
Well, 2003, you're the last winner of the Admiral's Cup.
That's right. I know. So the next few years from 99 through to the early 2000s were great years of doing all those regattas, sailing Bumblebee with Johnny Calbezza. I did the transatlantic record with Nicorette. And I sailed a long time, for many years, with Lutta Ingvall, who's a great competitor in the Sydney Hobart and character. Yeah. And that was it's very enjoyable sailing with all other nationalities. That was all Swedish, and we were sponsored by Nicorette. And in 2000, that was an incredible Hobart for us, because that was my first time I won line honours.
Line honours,
yeah. And that was exciting. When we got to I remember we came around, and those that have done the Hobart remember those big storms that come through Storm Bay, and Canute Frostad was on board, and we're coming up to the Iron Pot, and something happened. We had to cut away the tip, and they sort of almost went everyone down below, and we got, that was all done, and then we got up to the finishing line. It was sleeting and snowing.
Normal Hobart race.
Hobart race. So that was an incredible win, that one. Yeah. And the first one's always the hardest. Yeah. So that was great. And then 2001 we had the Twister. For those that remember that one, it was incredibly hot leading up to the start. Bushfires. The sky was dark, and we started the race, and we're going down, I think, off Wollongong, and we could see this Twister in the distance, and we're going, for some reason it's coming towards us, and this was on Nicorette again, and I remember Grant Warrington being just up between there, and then Lutta said okay, I want everybody down below, and so we pulled the main down, tied it down, everybody went down below, Lutta stayed on deck with one other person, I think, and when it happened, when it hit us, it was the scale last I could see was 70 knots, but it lifted the boat. I mean, it really did. It was quite frightening. Scary, yeah. So it did some damage to the main. So that year we didn't win line honours, but anyway, so that was just the Hobart throws everything at you.
Yeah, it never lets you down, as they say.
Never lets you go.
But I mean, Adrienne, your record, 31 Hobarts, I think 6 line honours, 3 overall handicap wins. It's an incredible record. And, the first woman to get to 25 Hobart races, and now 31. I mean, as I said, you could go on forever, but just a couple of highlights.
Oh, but there's too many.
Yeah.
But
a handicap win's always good, isn't it?
Handicap win, because it's so hard to get. Yeah. I mean, it took me 15 years to win the first time, and that was my fabulous tenure with Wild Oats on Wild Oats 11.
A lot of fun, great owner.
A great owner, yeah. And that was when, we'd done the Admiral's Cup in 2003, and by then I'd sort of been shore crew on another Volvo campaign, which was fantastic. And then I'd done quite a bit of transatlantic sailing in the Amoccas. And I'd actually started to do a little bit of onshore weather routing, which was interesting but very hard. I think the people like Roger Badham and all these Ken Campbell who do that onshore weather routing, they're incredible people, because we had that in the Jules Verne and then we also had it in Cheyenne. So in between doing that Nicorette and then doing that Volvo, I did the round the world on Cheyenne in the old play station with Steve Fossett.
Right.
So that was
did you get round?
We broke the record, 58 days.
58 days.
Yeah.
That's right, I forgot about that.
Yeah, so that was in 2004.
So she was a catamaran.
That was a catamaran?
Catamaran, yeah.
Yeah, so that was 110. And we'd also done some interesting projects in 2002, because Tracy had got us all back together again and said, I want to do, in 1998 we hadn't broken the Jules Verne when we broke our rig. So she said, would you come back and let's do it on the Ollier Cat? So we did. We started to do all these records, but we all said this time, let's make it not just all girls, let's make another statement and do it half-half. So we had exactly half-half. And this was another time when I was skipper with Brian Thompson and another girl, Helena Darvelid, and we broke the 24-hour record. And that was incredible. We started at the bottom of Virginia, and we had a couple of Aussies on board, which was fabulous. A couple of Aussie skiff sailors, one of Greg, who were great at trimming, because that was a boat where the hull flew, and you had to be really careful. So we started at the bottom of Virginia and we got going, and the first 6 hours we averaged 34 knots, and then we went on the front of a front, and then the front caught up to us, waited a bit, and then kept going, and we beat Steve Fossett's record. We did 6:97, I think, and we beat it by 15 minutes. So it was incredible. So this is just this whole world of so many different things you can do, and the multi. So we did that, and then we ultimately didn't do the Jules Verne because just couldn't get the money together, I don't think, with Tracy.
When you broke the record with Steve Fossett, was he on board?
Yes, he was.
Right.
Yes. So Steve Fossett, we had 13 people, and in fact this year we're all in touch, because it's 20 years exactly since.
And how long did that take you, did you say?
That took us 58 days.
58, and that was the record.
That was the record, yeah. So after that, then I joined the Volvo campaign, Torben Grail's Brazil one, and as the navigator, and I was just there for the first league. Right, we did sort of see,
Well, more recently, a couple of months ago, you won the Hobart again on a live.
Yes.
And I mean, looking at the weather prior to the race, everyone said it was tricky. It was going to be a very tricky race. I think even on Boxing Day morning, no one really knew what it was going to do, but you obviously got it right.
Well, it was, there's been a couple of races like this. I can name, for example, 2012, when we were Wild at 10, where everything that we said was going to happen happened. Sometimes 2005 was another one when we won the handicap. We're 16 days out, which is the normal time that the first GFS model comes out. It almost happened as it happened on the day. Whereas 2011 was one, and this year was one where the model changed not just daily, it changed each model run. So you really just did not get an opportunity to have any certainty in the forecast. So that meant all issues related to planning, sales, things and also just the general, everybody gets a bit of comfort from knowing what's going to happen. Yes. But this year was very difficult because, people remember before Christmas was very hot, very humid. The models weren't coping with all those variables. And so it really came up. Our decision was made, and which what the forecaster had said at the briefing before. She said, watch out with the upper level lows on the south coast and the current that was running hard, how hot and what that'll do. And that actually ultimately what happened. We got up there, saw the squall line along the coast there and said, well, you're not going to go into that. So we made the decision. Yeah. So it became apparent in the afternoon, but we'd done, triple the work of a normal race because you had to get, the whole team had to be over so many scenarios, and that was where our team, we had an incredible group of people, because they were over all those scenarios, they were well informed, so it meant that all the sail changes, there was nothing left to chance, and we only won the race by 12 minutes, and anybody knows that's a bad reef.
Yes.
Or a bad sail change,
yeah.
and we didn't have any. So we did lose a jib top, that cost us, but other than that, the race went very, very smoothly.
Yeah, for a live second win.
Yeah.
So, Adrienne, what now? What's next for you?
Well, that's always a question. Actually, I've always been asked that question. After I'd done the around the world, they said, "What's next? What's next?" And I'm sort of at a different stage of my life. I've got teenage children, and so COVID actually was really difficult, because we weren't able to. I relied a lot. In 2019, I still do these races. So Transpac, California Race Week. I've tended to do a lot of my offshore sailing in the States. And they're very smart. Their races start in a nice place and finish in an even warmer place.
Yes.
Every time I turn right to Hobart, I think, when's
why?
this race
Why am I
committee
doing
going to
that?
work?
Yes.
And so I love that circuit. And so it was really hard in those few years with COVID, where we all couldn't travel overseas, because you lost a lot of connections. So the last year has been building up. 2023 has been a lot about building up those teams. Again, I sailed Transpac last year. St Bart's is another great. I love doing races, particularly where you've never done before, because it's all living something new. And I've never won the Transpac, so I love that race to try and win that again. So I do enjoy all the sailing still. So I think when you ask what's next for me, it's just there's still lots of great sailing to do.
Will we see you for the Rolex Sydney Hobart race in 2024?
Yeah, well, it's funny, because my children, when we were talking about my two daughters, when we were talking about Lindsay May just doing his 50s, they said, "Mum, you can get to 50." And I said, "Oh, I don't know about that."
You've got 19 to go.
19 to go.
Well, Adrienne, thank you. It's been wonderful. I mean, as I said earlier, we could talk forever. An amazing career over so many races and events, and with people. It's incredible. Congratulations, and we look forward to continuing on with watching your progress, and good luck.
Well, thanks, Shippers, because we've had some great days at sea together.
We have, haven't we?
We have, and I'm hoping there'll be more to come.
Yeah, it'd be nice. Okay, thanks, Adrienne.
Thanks.